Do you think that the changing media and the changing kinds of media that we have will impact the way we use public opinion data? Is a problem for news media attempts to conduct polls? Is the future any brighter or darker than today?
It's both. Depends. It could go either way, and we're still in a state of uncertainty about that. Mark Twain, I think, said that truth is always that falsehood is faster than truth. That if you try to chase a lie with the truth is still putting on its shoes while the falsehood is halfway around the world. On the other hand, John Milton said, and I have been kidded by my colleagues for comparing Mark Twain to John Milton, but they were both poets of their time and quite relevant. John Milton said, give truth and falsehood a fair field to fight, and truth will be stronger and will prevail. But it takes time for that to happen. And I wonder if in the information age, with so much noise and confusion, if truth really can prevail. Because organizing information to keep truth from being drowned out is really difficult. And we're going to have to invent new institutions to make that happen, I think. So we're sort of like in the early days of printing, when the lonely pamphleteers worked for special narrow interests and weren't exactly purveyors of truth. But in the end, they got organized into newspapers, and it became very much in the economic interests of newspapers to tell the truth. And behind the standards of journalism, we journalists like to think that it's because of our virtue that we have those standards, but there's really an economic incentive behind them, that truth is more valuable than falsehood. And if you have a reputation for telling the truth in your news medium, the advertising in that news medium will be more valuable because that aura rubs off on the advertiser. And my illustration for that was the ads in the National Enquirer. If the front page shows a picture of a presidential candidate being interviewed by aliens, you can bet that the ads will be for pills that make you lose weight while you sleep and other things that only the most gullible would believe.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So, but what's the analog for that in the new media? That's the issue.
Right. I mean, we are sort of in a way going into a brave new world of media availability.
Yeah.
And yet at the same time, a lot of uncertainty about how that works in the business sense and how it can go ahead, and a time when newspapers are having real issues and real struggles in surviving.
Right.
And in keeping their staffs and their ability to get at the truth.
Yep.
Alive and with us. Did you find, while you were president of AAPOR, did you have to deal with any crises that surprised you, or crises that really took up your time?
All I remember is the good part. It was fun. And if there was a crisis, I've repressed the memory.
Let's talk again. Let's go back to your presidential address, which has gone down in history as the presidential address that was delivered from memory or was made up on the spot. I'm not sure what the mythology around it is. But let's clear that up. Did you invent that presidential address while you were standing there? Did you memorize it, or did you memorize it, or what?
I created the illusion of inventing it while I was standing there. I wrote it out in advance. I memorized the outline. And then there was a stage. This was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, I think. And there was a lectern with a microphone. And I took the notebook with my prepared speech and put it on top of the lectern. Then I took the microphone out of its holder. It had a long cord so you could walk around with it. And I walked to the front of the stage and began my talk. And so it appeared that I was making it up as I went along. So a student of mine was there, and before it started, he said, please try to make this sound more like a lecture than a speech that you're reading. And I said, okay, I can do that. And so his name was Gary Gaddy. I guess he gets the credit for that. And then after going through the first 4 or 5 paragraphs, standing at the front of the stage to establish presence, then I walked back and stood next to the lectern, sometime resting my elbow on it, and occasionally glancing over at my script and turning the pages. But evidently nobody saw me turning the pages. I must have been that spellbinding.
I'm sure you were. I'm sure you were. Okay, then, and additionally, then, your book, Precision Journalism, which has been named one of the 50 most critical books in public opinion. It's been translated, I see, into all kinds of languages.
Even Bulgarian, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
I think Turkish. I read, and it has gone through several iterations.
4.
Would you do another one? Do you think the 4th one holds up? Do you think the changing media practices requires?
I'm sure an update is needed, but I'm not capable of doing it because the technology has outrun me. I'm slowing down in my old age. The 4th edition, published in 2002, holds up pretty well, I think. But look at all the crazy things that they're doing in public opinion research now, because the sampling frame doesn't hold still anymore. I liked it best when you knew exactly what your sampling frame was. In the early days of Gallup, it was households. Households don't move around, they hold still. And then it became telephone numbers. And that was in the days when most households had only one telephone line. And there were very few unlisted, but there were ways to randomize access to the unlisted. And sampling was really good then. And now, with so many different ways of communicating and so many distractions, and none of those sampling frames hold still, so you have to use multiple frames, and then you have to try to guess at the weights that will put them together in a reliable way. And I'm not willing at my age to sit down and learn how to do all that stuff and to teach it to journalists.
Well, how about in the traditional forms of journalism, the traditional forms that do you think that enough journalists have learned from precision journalism?
Oh yeah, sure. And there's some things that you can still do. The last survey I did as a professor was I was wary of telephone surveys even in the early 2000s, but I did have the nerve to do a mail survey using the Don Dillman method and using registered voters as active registered voters as my sampling frame. Active registered voters being those who had had some contact with the election board in the previous 4 years, either by voting or registering for the first time or changing address. And that made a good sample, and I did a mail survey that accurately predicted the success of the bond issue to fund new construction at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I was pretty proud of winning that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So let's come back to AAPOR, the organization. You talked at the very beginning about Bud Roper giving you the rundown on the culture of AAPOR.
Yeah.
And then, you were a pretty regular attendee at conferences for decades after that.
Yes.
Culture changed? AAPOR changed? How's it changed?
It changed so gradually that I don't think I was aware of it. The thing that made AAPOR different from all the other organizations was it blended academic and commercial interests. And that was really good for both sides. It made the academics more practical, and it made the commercial people more interested in theory. And a lot of creative stuff came out of that mix. And I think that didn't change. I think that's still true today, although I haven't been to a meeting for some time now.
AAPOR is bigger. You probably wouldn't bring your dog there.
Oh yes, I know what changed. And this probably happened, if not on my watch, close to it. AAPOR had a preference for small hotels and out-of-the-way places and tried to arrange it so it would be the only organization meeting in that hotel at that time. That was the nice thing about the Sagamore. And we eventually outgrew the Sagamore. But we found other interesting places. I think the place in Lancaster, where I gave my presidential address, was small, that we had pretty much to ourselves. But now it eventually got to where you have to have big city hotels, and at least they're places that are easy to get to. but we don't have that intimacy that we had in the old days.
Yeah, do you think, how much is lost by that? I mean, or can it be made up by the fact that we're now so locked into each other and so connected to each other electronically? And
I don't know, but I know the best part of AAPOR for me was the informal part, hanging around the bar, sitting in the lobby, swapping stories and so forth, and bonding with people who had information that you could mutually share. That was that was a good part of it.
so the serendipity of running into people
Yeah.
who you wouldn't be seeing or wouldn't even think of communicating with on a regular
Right. Right.
basis.
Yeah.
Okay. Have I kept you talking for about 40 minutes?
You have?
Yeah.
Time goes fast when you're having fun.
I think it's been about 40 minutes. Maybe it's a little less than that. But let me just see if there's anything that you need to say, want to say, any anecdotes you want to convey, need to convey, that would be of interest and value to current AAPOR membership and future AAPOR membership. Because this is all going to be archived. It's going to be available, hopefully online at some point.
Yeah. Well, AAPOR really helped me qualify to write precision journalism. And although the interest in that was stimulated partly by the Harvard experience, Thomas Pettigrew was at Harvard then, and he told the Russell Sage Foundation about me. And they invited me to a meeting in their offices in about 2 years after Harvard. And then the political scientist, Bernie, what was his name? He was a guy who was on the staff of the Political Science Association, suggested that I write a book about it, a handbook for journalists how to do this stuff. And so when the Russell Sage Foundation invited me to talk about their mutual interests, I mentioned that. And they leaped on the idea because they were trying to promote awareness of the social sciences among journalists. And what better way to do that than teaching journalists how to actually use this material? So that was my first foundation grant, and it was so easy to get. And then the book worked out, although the foundation decided wasn't what it expected, and the plan had been for it to publish. It was structured as a work-for-hire project, but they decided they didn't want to have their name associated with the product, and they signed the rights back to me. And but it turned out fine for both of us because I credit them with in every edition, and the book did well on its own. And all the time, AAPOR was my means of staying current and staying up to date as I went through the 4 editions over time. And but the point it made me pretty good as a professional grant getter. And one of the things that happened was the Council for the Advancement of Science Writing invited me to join their board, and we got money from the National Science Foundation to teach public opinion polling to journalists. And among we had seminars for 2 or 3 years in a row at Northwestern University. And Barry Sussman was one of my proteges there, who later became famous as the Watergate editor. And after that, we became the Washington Post person in charge of polls and a regular AAPOR member. So one thing leads to another, and it was sort of like a rolling stone picking things up.
Great. I also think that there is these things do accrete on one another, and something happens, and then something else happens down the road.
Yeah.
And you can point back to something that happened a long time ago to see that. In a way, theoretically, AAPOR should be even better at it these days with AAPORnet and online resources.
I think so, except maybe you don't need that serendipity anymore because you get the serendipity online by browsing each other's websites. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I'm not sure.
Is that a weird idea or what?
No, I think there is some real value in in-person communication and in-person kind of because in person you run into people you wouldn't even think of communicating with.
That's true.
And if they're not putting out what they're thinking, you're not hearing it
online.
Right. So I think there's clearly some evolution that that needs to be.
It reminds me of that cartoon of a dog at a computer and saying, no, on the internet, nobody knows you're a dog.
It's true, that's true. And nobody knows you're doing this in your pajamas.
Right.
Which is fine.
Yeah. Yes.
Unless you're on Skype. That's
But yeah, the personal contact was really what makes AAPOR work.
okay, okay. Any other words of wisdom for researchers of tomorrow? For journalists of tomorrow?
Yes, I would like to share a resolution that I have made as I've thought about new media. And that is, I have totally stopped criticizing and complaining about weird experiments in the media. Because no matter how weird something is, no matter how crazy, if it's new, I don't say anything against it because I cannot be certain that it will not work. And the only way to find out what works is to try all kinds of crazy stuff. And I hope AAPOR is, in its present incarnation, is doing that, trying weird stuff. I see a lot of stuff being done with polls, and I close my mouth and I don't complain about it because maybe in this new environment it will contribute to knowledge.
Great. Thank you very much, Phil.
My pleasure.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Your AAPOR award, which came in 2000, I think.
Right.
Really sort of was AAPOR's statement of respect for precision journalism and for your work in AAPOR.
That came with a nice citation. And you wrote that, I think. At least it sounded like you.
I don't think I.
Oh.
I'm not sure I wrote it. Maybe I did, but I wasn't president then, so I
Right.
wasn't in charge.
Yeah.
But that's yes, and we can pull that out, and we will have that up online with this interview.
Well, thank you.
So, thanks, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.